This game has not yet been rated.
You're about to begin the greatest moment of your life.
Call of Duty Finest Hour will be a more intense experience for game players because there's no rest. The war never stops.
Join us as we go behind the front lines of the newest installment of the award-winning Call of Duty series, Call of Duty Finest Hour.
Call of Duty Finest Hour is an intense, action-oriented, cinematic look at the experience of World War II.
Currently in production, we join the team in the trenches as they embark on an exhaustive pre-production phase and encounter new challenges in creating this groundbreaking game.
The team felt that it was really important to creatively explore uncharted territory with this title. I think people will see that this is a world they've never been in before, and they're able to have an immersive quality of reality that, to my knowledge, has never been attempted.
The game takes players to the front lines of World War II combat across 4 countries on the Eastern, North African, and Western fronts.
This battlefield opens up and we have 250 guys on screen running up this hill with the chaos of battle and the explosions and that cinematic intensity of the war experience.
For the first time, players will be able to experience the war through the eyes of American, British, and Russian soldiers.
Some are more traditional, like the American GI or the British PPA Commando. Others are roles that I don't think a game has really explored before, like being able to play a Russian female sniper or an African-American tank commander from the famed 761st Black Panther Battalion. Rather than kind of a super soldier's experience in World War II, where an American GI takes on the world, they really wanted to portray a more realistic experience.
An original game designed specifically for console systems, Finest Hour is the brainchild of Spark, comprised with over 30 of the individuals who developed titles in the Medal of Honor series, including several of the production leads.
This team has had a lot of experience in the World War II genre category. Most of them worked on the original Medal of Honor. When we launched Spark, it was really about creating a place that they felt would allow them to do the best work of their careers. Whether it's the sound, whether it's the art, whether it's the animation, design, backgrounds, everybody is intensely invested in making sure that what they contribute to the game is as detailed and authentic and exciting and dynamic as possible.
To meet this goal, Spark mounted an exhaustive research phase before starting production on the game.
We really build our levels on top of a mountain of research to bring to life the voices of these people who lived in those conflicts. So we've talked to military advisors.
I mean, in a disciplined outfit, you'd go nuts if someone pointed the muzzle at you. It's called muzzle control.
Fairly easy adjustment for the animation team.
What has really impressed me is that this development team clearly wants to make sure the foundation of their game is strong.
They really wanted to go to the locations, go to the battlefields to get a sense of the environments, of the lighting, of the masonry work that went into the construction of the buildings.
The attention to detail in the game is extraordinary.
We are getting audio recordings for a variety of weapons.
So again, as a British submachine gun, this is the Sten Mark II.
Getting the sound right, important part of the sensory experience of the battlefield.
This dedication to realism ensures players will be able to experience the most intense and authentic World War II experience.
We've brought veterans through to spend time with us and really talk about what it was like. Johnny Stevens, who's one of the surviving members of the 761st Battalion, came in and spent a whole week with the team just talking about his experiences.
No tank crew dismounts all at once and leave that tank unprotected. When you are trying to simulate something, you don't want to guess at it. You have to become a part of it. So they're trying to portray the actions of a soldier. So to do this, you must become a soldier, and you have to think like a soldier.
Heading into production, the team is distilling their obsessive research and experiences into a common vision.
We're in the middle of it right now. We're all in the trenches.
However, creating an innovative game comes with its challenges.
We've had to develop so much new technology and so many new systems to handle the scope of the design. We didn't want this to be a world where it's you and a few guys against another couple guys. We wanted it to feel like armies against armies. We wanted to have planes in the skies and boats in the river, and we wanted to have guys charging up the hill on all sides of you.
The team will continue production over the next several months, making this innovative vision a reality.
Get your head down!
Call of Duty: Finest Hour, coming fall 2004.
We set out to do a lot more than just create another game that has more levels and different enemies. We wanted to change the player's experience, give them something that they hadn't had before, while still retaining the feel of Jak and Daxter.
That's right. Don't mess with the sugar.
In Jak 2, we were able to build upon what we had created before and go in all new kinds of directions and create things that would not have been possible with the original engine because we had such a great starting point to work with.
We wanted to really up the ante in a number of different realms. First of all, we wanted to put a lot more things on screen, enemies that were attacking you, things moving around, so the player had the real feeling of being in an inhabited world instead of just a pretty world, and that adds a lot more options in terms of gameplay.
Let me handle this, Jak. Watch my finesse and style.
This story is a much more complex story than in the original Jak and Daxter. We're exploring a large number of more adult themes. There's bigger, greater evils around you, and there's betrayal and love. This is not just a kid's story. This is a story with a much broader reach.
Jak has really done a lot of growing up this game. The plot actually starts out with him spending some time in jail, and he becomes hardened, and when he emerges, he's definitely changed.
We're not doing anything until you tell us why metalheads are trading with the Baron's forces.
I should have had you both kneecapped, eh?
We knew what kind of character he was going into the first Jak and Daxter, but now we really have the opportunity to really develop his persona and his character. There's a very volatile element to this universe, which is the dark eco. And now we start to see how that's affecting Jak.
Something's happening to me. Something he did. I can't control it.
That was cool. Do it again.
Here we have the evolution of what became the final Jak. Here we start seeing the Jak that we're more used to. His hair got a bit more weighted down. We still want to keep it long. Actually, we tried the buzz cut here. We tried various other looks, the locks on the side, the facial hair still is kind of sticking around. We kind of like this kind of look as well with the rebel look and the old headgear and a bit added on. So we can see that Jak's been through some combat. He's beefed up and he's ready to go.
It took us a long time to find the right voice for Jak. But Mike Irwin, I mean, if there is a person in the real world that is Jak, it's Mike Irwin.
We've done what you've asked. Now when do we see the shadow?
Max Casella has returned to reprise the role as Daxter, and he is just a goldmine for us.
This could have a serious impact on the lady factor.
He's a bit grown up now because he's now in the big city, and there's a lot of big city vices for him to experiment with.
Hot. And wait, I've seen you before.
Shh, I'm Tess. Play along, and I may be able to get my hands on a few secrets.
Ooh, I love undercover work, baby.
We were always just thinking that basically the abuse of Daxter is the fun of this game.
I need one of those.
The reason the animation looks more sophisticated this time around is because there's been some tweaks to the engine. We're also just being a lot more clever about the way we allocate memory and design our levels. The most visible difference in the cutscenes is that our characters now have upwards of 10,000, 12,000 polys in them, whereas in the first game, the original Jak and Daxter, the characters would have maybe 2 or 3. The bottom line is what we are doing now in real time on the PlayStation 2 took an entire room full of computers, hours to do, as little as 5 years ago.
We have a much greater amount of detail in the new game. We have single locations on our game that have larger polygon counts, equal polygon counts to some of the entire levels in the original game.
What's great about working with Naughty Dog is these guys are not happy just to have their game look as good as their previous game. They want to set a new standard for animation or artwork or programming on every single game that they do.
We're always trying to push the envelope on both a technical and artistic scale.
Jak 2 is really a landmark title for Naughty Dog. We're really trying to create a cinematic feel that will set the new standard that other games will try to emulate.
Visual effects plays a really important part of this game in particular, even more so than the last two titles. The characters are more dramatic, there's big, larger-than-life characters, and there's also more exciting characters that you never were able to play before. And so our job in this game is to bring those things to life in a really spectacular way, in the same way that special effects bring a blockbuster movie to life. One of the highlights of this game is, of course, the Balrog. Visually, he's a very exciting character. The big challenge was to create the most realistic fire ever seen in a video game, and to really bring him to life and make him as convincing as he was in the movie. To start off with, I built elements of flame using Maya's fluid dynamics system. And so the advantage of using that as a starting point is that it recreates a really realistic way that flame actually moves. And so it has a lot of texture, and just the movement of it is really convincing. And so this is the basis of what I use for the flame in-game. Then I take it into our proprietary effects system and essentially build mini effects. Then I change it to a sort of like an X-ray mode where I can actually see his individual joints. So here you can see the different bones within his skeleton moving. This line that's coming out from his hand is actually his whip. And then what I can do is pick bone by bone and attach individual effects. So there's some emitting from different joints in his wings, there's some on his arms, on his legs, on his torso, glows on his eyes, and of course there's all kinds of fire coming off of his back and his sort of fiery mane. And then in addition to that, there's smoke that's pouring off of both legs, his torso, and his wings. So in total, there's probably 30 different miniature effects systems that all combine to give you the overall look of the Balrog. In previous games that I've worked on, once we start hitting around 2,000 particles, the frame rate starts to drag. We can push between 10 and 20,000 particles before we even begin to impact our frame rate. So that gives us a massive advantage over other games. Typically in a video game, flame is really recognizable as a looping, repeating pattern, and it tends to be really glowy and not very detailed. And so my goal was to make it have a lot of texture and a lot of movement and feel real and fluid and alive and dangerous. And so and I think we've accomplished that on this game.
Back when the Metal Gear Solid 2 trailer was shown at E3 in 2000, there was a standing ovation. Now it's time for the next generation, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater.
Just playing the game for the first 5 minutes, you'll notice that Metal Gear Solid 3 is totally different from the previous ones. First of all, the setting will be the jungle. It'll be caves, it'll be the mountains, different settings. And the time setting will be the 1960s, when espionage was the big thing, when spies were spies. And doing all this spying in the jungle, I guess what you'll see the most is trying to hide yourself from the enemy, and the enemy trying to find you. This element of espionage will be so much stronger than any previous Metal Gear Solid. In the previous Metal Gear Solid games, the only enemies were human. But as Solid Snake in Metal Gear Solid 3, you actually have to survive in this natural environment first, before you get to the human enemies. For example, if you're in the mountains when you're climbing up a slope, your stamina is going to be affected. You're going to be tired more easily. And you'll also be affected by the weather and temperature. Like if it's cold, you might start losing your energy.
To power back up, you'll need to go hunting. Lunch might be an alligator or a frog, and of course the title-making snake. But as usual, there's a signature Kojima twist.
You're in the jungle and you'll see animals around. You can actually hunt these animals and eat them for food. But not only can you capture animals to eat, you can also capture them and use them as weapons. For example, you could grab a snake and maybe throw it at an enemy.
So it's snake eating and snake throwing combined to help battle the environment and the enemy. But you better not forget to be stealthy.
If you just stop, look around, hear something from the side, look in that direction, you'll see something. It might be an enemy, and if the enemy sees you, he's going to attack you.
And that's something to be avoided. Fortunately, the MGS crew has you covered in at least 5 different ways. And you get to paint your face.
A really big theme in Metal Gear Solid 3 is camouflage. Depending on where you are, depending on what kind of vegetation there is around you, you'll be changing your gear so that the enemies won't be spotting you as easily. If you don't change your gear, depending on where you are, they're going to find you.
And where they find you will be more natural and realistic than ever before. The environment gives a whole new meaning to Welcome to the Jungle.
Even with the drawing power of PlayStation 2, it was really hard to come up with an entire jungle with a natural environment, something that most video games have avoided. To create such a detailed natural environment, we ended up renewing the graphics engine and the gameplay engine as well. When you actually step into the jungle and when you're standing there, that sense of presence, you really feel like you're in a jungle.
You'll also feel like you're really in the 60s. It's not an Orwellian time machine thing, but you'll be back in the 60s anyway, man.
I was born in the 60s, so it really wasn't that distant of a past for me. But many of the guys on my team are young. They were born in the 70s. And for them, it was really hard for them to sort of get a grasp of what the 60s were like. We've read a lot of books and seen all the films from the 60s and listened to the music, and even studied the fashion of the 60s.
It's the age-old thrill of the chase that makes Snake Eater one of the truly great games of all time.
I probably shouldn't be saying this because it's my own, but the gameplay I think is going to be awesome, especially with the element of trying to be hidden from the enemy and the enemy trying to find you. That element is just going to stand out so strongly and vividly in this game. The level of tension in this game is something you've never experienced before. I'm like, can I really release this game with all this tension? You know, it's going to be so exciting and scary in that sense. Maximum level of tension. I really think people should look forward to that.
The wait is finally over. Viewtiful Joe, the crazy retro-style action game that put the joy back in joystick and the roll back in side-scroll, is coming to the PlayStation 2. And not a moment too soon.
We just went, look, we want cool characters, we want cool enemies, and we want cool gameplay. This wasn't a game based on dollar signs. This was a game based on what do people like to play.
The hugely successful title is built around a pretty straightforward but endlessly enticing storyline. Joe, a regular schmo, is at the movies with his girlfriend.
Whoa, Sylvia! Cut it out!
She gets sucked into the film, and he follows.
Hey, wait a minute. Am I inside the movie?
My young Joe, it looks like you haven't awakened to your true powers as a hero.
A regular Joe turns superhero off to rescue his girl. The storyline is classic, and so is the interface.
It looks like an American comic. Cell shading and side-scrolling contribute to the feel you get in a comic book world. People want to play with the feeling that they are a classic hero character.
The core of Viewtiful Joe is old-school platform side-scrolling, okay? But in order for us to accomplish that in this day and age, we needed to incorporate 3D elements, and we also needed to make it very deep.
The game borrows heavily from the best of action movie cliches.
A lot of people have grown up with Star Wars type of films and shows where like a typical teenager in high school living a normal life was actually a superhero in disguise. Another one, of course, is karate films, action films. For example, there's a move called replay, where just like in an old kung fu film, when somebody gets a really big hit or it's the last punch, it shows it from 3 angles and you see the bam, bam, bam.
One of the effects is slow. That's a power that enables gameplay to slow down. It's like a scene from the movie Matrix when they dodge bullets.
So for those of you that think Viewtiful Joe might be too simplistic, think again.
On the surface, when you look at Viewtiful Joe, it might look like just a regular side-scrolling 2D action game, but we do utilize the modern-day hardware to make sure that the player gets a very in-depth experience. So when you utilize your super moves, it not only affects what's going on with you, it also affects the environment.
The developers, Capcom, have added some unique features in porting the game to the PlayStation 2 platform. One of the biggest improvements is the addition of Dante.
Dante is the main character from Devil May Cry, but his dad was like a demon from back in the day. So he decides to utilize his special powers to defeat evil in the world. When we first released Viewtiful Joe, there's a character, the enemy character named Alistor, who has some tie-ins with Devil May Cry. Because of those crossovers, we figured, okay, what character would make sense putting him in Viewtiful Joe, and what character would be fun to play? And we chose Dante. If you think that you know Viewtiful Joe to the core, you should try the PlayStation version because the Dante character brings a whole new dynamic. He can utilize his talents from the original game, where he has a double jump, he has a sword that he can throw, and he has his 2 guns. That, in conjunction with slowdown and speed up, makes Dante a pretty tough customer and pretty fun to play.
And just when you're totally hooked on Viewtiful Joe, they followed it up with a second round. Version 2 hit the ground running with lots of new features.
In Viewtiful Joe 1, Sylvia is the heroine, but she comes back as a playable character in Viewtiful Joe 2.
And you can look forward to a whole host of new supervillains that are as exciting and enigmatic as the ones in the first one.
Beyond those teases, the designers of version 2 are being tight-lipped about all it will have to offer, but they are willing to pass along some tips for improved play.
You can play through the first level without learning how to dodge the enemy moves, but learn how to dodge the enemy moves. It shows you where they're going to attack, and then you dodge the other direction. And if you do that, the whole game dynamics change up, because once you dodge them, then you can push slow, and when you punch them, they become projectiles, and everything changes. A whole new element to the game opens up. So a lot of thought has been put into that type of stuff, but also characters are likable, the enemies are funny, and I like that type of stuff. Like a good cartoon, but hip, on the level.
Let's get it on!
By the end of the game, there's no way that you can't be satisfied if you like playing video games.
Subscribe. Boom, ba-jack, boom, boom, ba-jack, boom, ba-jack, boom.